Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, our guest today is a multiple #1 international bestselling author, motivational speaker, empowerment coach, and profits enhancer for enlightened leaders with over 30 years experience of transformational leadership. She's the founder of Genuinely You and has developed a variety of personal and professional programs to support success. For over 20 years, she ran her award-winning school, for the most part from a wheelchair, after overcoming a life-threatening injury in which she had to learn how to walk again twice as an adult. She works with leaders who are becoming more aware that there is a new way, one which requires the courage to discover the new emerging version of yourself, illuminating the way for enlightened leaders. Welcome to the show, Gina Gardiner.
Hello there. Thanks very much for having me on the show. Really pleased to be here.
Yeah, this is great, guys. If you're tuning in, I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me. And the reason I'm bringing Gina to us today is I had the opportunity to meet her virtually a couple weeks back now. And when I heard her story, I didn't know what she was about to unwrap and deliver to me. We were simply talking about leadership and kind of seeing where the fit was. And she has an incredible career. But what I'd like to do first, Gina, is anyone who's not familiar with your backstory, I think it's so inspiring. It is inspiring about how you got to where you're at today. You've had multiple levels of success with many businesses and also in school. We're going to talk about all of that. But before we do, we talk about overcoming adversity a ton on the show. Can you tell your story about how, again, you had that devastating injury? This was in the early 80s on a Black Diamond ski slope. Can you kind of walk us through how that happens and then how you get through that to continue on with your career?
So I started teaching and I was very quickly promoted. And at the age of 28, I was promoted to be the deputy principal of a large, I think in America, the equivalent would be a junior high school. Mm-hmm. I was promoted to be the catalyst for change, the youngest bar 2 on the staff. And my role, I was told, was to help move things forward, move the educational agenda forward. And I spent the first 6 months with the principal, John Hughes, lovely man, working very hard to create strategic plans to move us forward. In England, in February, we have a week's school holiday, and I went off skiing, very keen skier. And in those days, it was the fashion to have skis as long as possible. And I had a new pair of skis for Christmas, and the guy in the shop convinced me that I really needed an extra 10 centimetres, that's about 4.5 inches, on the length of my skis. Mm-hmm. Went skiing, I proceeded to wrap that extra 4.5 inches around itself several times and had several nasty falls, although I was a very experienced skier.
Sure.
On the Thursday, I had a bad fall. I split my brand new ski suit from thigh to ankle, and I was really shaken up. And so I said to my friends, I'm going to go and get my confidence back. I'm going to go and ski on my own tomorrow morning. I'll meet you for lunch, which I did. And they said, we've found this fabulous new run. It's 6 kilometers. It's a great red run, lovely way to finish the holiday because it was our last day. And so off we went. Beautiful day. The sun was shining. The mountains looked absolutely magnificent. and we all got on the chairlift and went to the top of the mountain. I followed them, and we'd gone some way, turned a corner, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that this isn't where they thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
So instead of a beautiful red run that was going to go on for 6 kilometers, we were at the top of the Schindlergratz, which was the most difficult black run in St. Anton.
So before you went down, you noticed, okay, this is going to be a challenge even for an experienced skier. I'm in for a real crazy challenge right now, even before you lifted off.
It was pretty evident because this was a huge mogul field. And for those who don't know what a mogul is, it's where the snow has been carved out by the weather. And you can have moguls that are like cobbles, an inch or two, which are quite uncomfortable to ski on, but are fine. These were 6-foot monsters. It was very, very steep.
Yeah.
So it was a shallow or a narrow ravine with powder snow each side, and then these moguls. No way to go back. It was too far and too difficult. The only way to get down was to ski. It would have been too dangerous to carry the skis because it was too steep.
Yeah.
So in that situation, you ski, turn on the top of the mogul, cut in and slide down, go along, turn on the mogul, cut and slide down.
Yeah.
And I left it too late, and I ended up I'd skied probably about a third, and then I left it too late to turn, and I fell quite a significant distance. It took me 20 minutes to retrieve my skis and to meet friends who were sitting on a mogul lower down.
Yeah.
So just imagine there's 5 of us, each of us sitting on a mogul like an elf sitting on a mushroom.
Yeah.
Took our skis off, they were already there. And as I say, it was a fabulous day. We were sitting in the sunshine, and suddenly the top of my mogul gave way. The sun had melted it, and then I'd sat on it, and it just slid away.
Uh-huh.
And there was nowhere to land. So I just bounced. Mm-hmm. What I remember is hearing something scream. I recognized later that was me. And then everything went black.
How far was the fall? About? Roughly?
I'm told it was between 150 and 200 feet.
Oh my gosh.
I had no skis on, and I knocked myself out. And I think those two things, and I think that there was a divine providence looking after me. Yeah. I came through in a shallow area because there was nowhere to land. So every time I bounced, I just bounced down further.
There's no stop to it. Yeah.
No. So I came to, and my friends finally reached me. The one good thing about it is between the bit of skiing, the 2 falls, I was almost at the bottom. And I was in a bit of a state, but I didn't want to go to have the blood wagon. And so my friends helped me back to the hotel. Mm-hmm. And I was in a bit of a state, I have to say. Yeah. But we travelled back the next day, and my mum took
to right in that moment. So you remember being taken. I'm not a big fan of the name blood wagon. We talked about that off camera. That's like basically an ambulance, right?
It's in Austria. It would be 2 skiers with a stretcher on skis.
Okay.
Would, put you on there, ski down, and then take you, and then there would be an ambulance at the bottom waiting.
Gotcha. So do you have recollection of that moment when you realized, wow, I need to be carried into this?
Well, I was insistent I didn't want it. I think it turned out when I was taken to hospital in the UK that I'd got a bad concussion, and I don't think I was thinking, to be quite honest. Yeah. I just wanted to get back to the hotel, and it wasn't, by this time it wasn't far, so they helped me back to the hotel, and we travelled back the next day. I was worried, thinking I was supposed to be back at school tomorrow. I've got a new job with all of this going on. Right. But as it was, it took me 3 weeks to get back to school. Mm-hmm. And a few weeks later, we were due, I was the deputy party leader for the borough ski trip for children. And so I was given permission to go, even though I wasn't quite right, because we had a medic going with us. On this ski trip, we were off to Switzerland, to Morgin, and this was much more gentle skiing because it was designed for learner skiers, although there were opportunities for more advanced skiing. But as the week went on, I became more and more like Quasimodo. And on the last evening, I said to my colleagues, I've got to go and lie down. I've always wanted to pull my weight, don't like letting people down. And so I'd struggled and I'd pushed so that I didn't disappear and leave my colleagues to it.
Sure.
But I went to lie down, and within a very few minutes, I discovered that I was paralyzed down one side. I couldn't move my left side at all. Mm-hmm. It was one of those situations where there were children in the corridor. I didn't want to frighten them by calling out. And so I had to wait till somebody came to see how I was. I've no idea how long it was. It just felt like forever.
Sure. And
as soon as they did, all hell broke loose and I was carted off to the local hospital and then transferred to Geneva University Hospital. Mm-hmm. And a week later, I was flown home straight to hospital. And it took me about 3 months to get back to school. I wasn't right.
So initially, just to make sure I'm following the timeline, from the accident, like the day that it happened, you were not half paralyzed at that point. It was when you got back to school, kind of some of the movement that kind of caused that to happen. Is that right?
What they think happened is that by skiing again, that the spine in the original accident, they think that the two vertebrae had snapped onto the spinal cord and very fortunately snapped off again. Oof. And had bruised it. Yeah. But by skiing, what I'd done is that I'd irritated the spinal cord and it was inflamed, and that's what cut off the nerve supply to the right side. Yeah. Wow. So by the time I got back to school, I was wearing a surgical collar. I was doing school, going home, going to bed. That's all I could manage. Mm-hmm. So I was really thrilled to get to the end of the term and know that I'd got 6 weeks summer holiday. And so I thought, I've got 6 weeks, I can really get myself fit here. Mm-hmm. And so it was probably about 10 days into the school holiday, very early in the morning, I got a phone call. And it was my principal's wife, and she was I couldn't make out what she was saying to start with. But it turns out that she'd found John, her husband. He'd died in the night from what turns out to be a massive heart attack. Wow. So the holiday that I expected to be recuperation ended up helping her with the funeral, letting all the staff, parents, the local authority know, and preparing for school. Mm-hmm. I was an acting principal from the day that John died until the following January, when I was appointed to be the permanent head. Mm-hmm. Physically,
the name is a head teacher. Is that the title?
Yeah, we don't. The title in the UK is head teacher.
And that's running the whole show, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was responsible for all the staff, the budget, the buildings, everything. Wow. And I don't know whether I made it consciously, to be quite honest with you, but I was determined that how I was physically would not get in the way of the quality of education for my pupils and for the staff. Yeah. I'd not been happy at school, and I wanted a very different experience for the kids who went through my school. Mm-hmm. And I'd worked with two very interesting principals who taught me very carefully how not to do it. Mm-hmm. And I was determined I wanted to do things differently.
Yeah.
And so
can I inject one moment here? I want to say, guys, again, as you're tuning into this incredible story, while Gina was the head teacher, again, running all the departments, the budget, the whole deal, that was at Parkland School. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right.
Twice that school was recognized as being in the best schools during her time there. And so if you can elaborate on how important your dedication was to what you really did while you were there, because you were there, you had a long tenure, and the importance of a solid education on our youth, if you can kind of shape that up for us.
I think the best investment that any parent and country can make is in educating children to think for themselves, to be creative, to look for opportunities to solve problems, to develop great self-worth, and to understand how they if they take responsibility for themselves and what they do, that they can be a really positive member of society. And I wanted them to enjoy it. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to be happy. And my school's in quite a challenging area. It's a very mixed area where there is quite a lot of aggression, latent aggression within the area. And so for me, we had a zero tolerance of aggression, which meant that every member of staff was taught how to diffuse, how to talk to people, how to deal with them, because we had to be squeaky clean.
Sure.
And I wanted children to have a great experience. So we had a quadrangle with animals. We had a school cat, rabbits, guinea pigs, ducks, chickens. We had 2 goats so that the children could care for those. We had a nature reserve, a garden, which the children tended. We had over 50 clubs and activities. We had 2 choirs, an orchestra, lots of drama, so that where we could offer something where children could excel, because nothing brings success like success. And so you might not be good at sports. We had loads of sports going on, and we did very well in the sporting ways.
Yeah, it's a great outlet, though. Somebody's like, obviously in the books, academics are so important, but someone can express themselves out playing football, which we're talking soccer, we would call it, but football, or being on stage in the drama, at the play or the musical, and just letting themselves flourish into we're talking about 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, right?
9, 10, 11, 12, yeah.
Okay, even that. Obviously still highly developmental years. And I think those are the years that really start to form into, you kind of learn a lot about who you are as a person. Like, you start playing an instrument at a higher level in those years. You find out, yes, I want to be on stage. I want to be maybe a teacher or something. Like, your dreams start to feel more real at 10, 11, 12 years old.
It's a time to explore, isn't it?
Yeah,
that you want to give lots of things a try.
Totally.
And for me, self-confidence and the capacity to say, I don't know how to do it, but I'll give it a go. Beliefs have such an importance. So I'll give you a classic example. And if you're listening to this and you've got children, really think about how you install your beliefs in your children. So it would be very common for a parent to say, oh, they're just like me, no good at maths. And I'd say to them, hold on a minute, they're not just like you. And say to the child, if you haven't got it, it's not that you're bad at maths, it's we haven't found the right key yet.
Yeah, I didn't unlock the door yet. It's there.
If you have the confidence to give things a go rather than immediately shutting the door and saying, I can't do that, I'm just like my mum or I'm just like my dad, then you don't try. But I can think of pupils who came hating maths, who then recognised actually when they gave themselves the opportunity, they were great. And one of the loveliest days for me, this is later on in my career, I was the principal for 20 years. And my secretary came in and said, you've got a visitor, have you got time to see them? And I said, yes. And in walked a guy. I didn't recognise him. He had a beard, slightly bald, in his 30s. And he said, do you recognise me? I said, I'm sorry. He said, my name is Paul Wizzy was, and he was in one of my classes when I was not a principal, very early on in my career. He said, I saw something in the paper about another award that the school had won, and I recognised you. He brought the biggest bottle of champagne I have ever seen, the biggest bouquet I have ever received, and the biggest box of chocolate I think they've ever made in the world. And he said, I hated maths and I didn't think I could do it. You taught me to love maths. I'm now in the money market. I have a very successful career. I have a huge house, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah,
Now,
that
that's
moment.
an indication that what you believe becomes your reality.
Yeah,
If you believe you can't, you won't.
exactly.
If you're open to it being possible, then you're halfway there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, if you take two people and you give them the same task, and one in their mentality the entire time they're telling themselves, I can't do this, I'm not able to do this, I don't know how to do this. And the other person may not know how to do it either, but they're thinking, I can do it, I will do it, it's going to get done. Literally, the only thing that's different is their mentality, but their physical ability and the task at hand is the same. Who do you think is more likely to get it done? Exactly, right? It's like mentality is step one, and then execution is two, and then you learn and grow, and then you can get better. But to start off with the mentality of I can't do it is like you're putting yourself way out of the game, way out of the game. So I want to go into something too. I appreciate you elaborating on that. And I know in reviewing your bio, you mentioned that the way you worded it was the gift of your experience. And I believe you're referring to your injury. Was the development of a unique approach to life and leadership. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
I'd like to think I would have come up with the same approach if I'd been able-bodied, but I'm also honest enough to know that I probably wouldn't have done it, at least not as quickly. I couldn't, so by 1987, I'm using a wheelchair to get around school, and later on, because I ruptured discs, two separate ones, I was completely wheelchair bound for long periods. I couldn't physically get into my classrooms. If I could get through the door, which I could do in a few classrooms, I couldn't get round the classroom because there was no space. So I had to find a way of enabling my staff to take radical responsibility for their own performance and a shared responsibility for the team. And in order to do that, I had to create an absolute understanding of every person involved, that what does excellence look like in the context of relationships, in the context of teaching maths or English or marking or giving feedback. So we had a shared professional language, because we use words, but we mean different things. Excellence is a perfect example. Everybody uses that word, we want excellence, but what they don't do is unpick it and say, okay, if I'm talking about excellence, what behaviors will I see? What language will I see? What's the evidence in terms of the outcome that we are expecting? And that approach, it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen in the sequential, structured way that it ended up, but it was created out of a need. Now, since then, I've used that. We were, as you so rightly said, we were on the best 100 schools in the country. Now, that's a list that's designated by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and they nominate what they think are top 100 schools in the country. Very proud of the fact we were on that list twice.
Twice, yeah. What are some of the metrics?
Well, I don't know how many thousands of schools there are in the UK.
Yeah.
But the UK's got 70. Well, the UK's got 70 million people. England, I think, is something like, I don't know. Let's say it's 55 million people.
Sure.
So, and they've chosen 10 schools.
Yeah. So it's a small.
Hundreds. I beg your pardon. 100 schools. So it gives you an indication that it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
We were also invited to become one of the first beacon schools. So we then worked with hundreds of other teachers and dozens of other schools, helping them use some of the same techniques and approaches to help them improve their standards. And I worked for the government as an advisor and worked for the National College of Leadership and so on. But since 2004, and I left headship in 2004, I've worked with businesses. and initially did a research project across businesses to say, were the issues around developing great leadership the same in finance and local government and health and manufacturing and retail and insurance and so on? And they are, because we're talking about people. So since 2004, I've worked with corporates and with businesses, helping them develop the same principles, but in the context of their company. And all of those companies that I've worked with for more than 9 months have become more productive, more profitable, greater relationships, better work-life balance, better health, because this stuff works.
Yeah. And you're in it. I mean, you've turned it into your personal brand, right? Your background has turned into your personal brand. And I see it right behind you. If you guys are watching this podcast, not only listening, Genuinely You, I mentioned at the top of the show, is Enlightened Leadership, right? And that's what Gina stands behind. And the website is genuinely-you.com. Can you tell us more about what some of the benefits, the core values and benefits of Genuinely You?
So Genuinely You is based on, before you can lead anybody, you have to lead yourself. Because you're the common denominator that you take with you wherever you go. And many leaders, particularly when you first meet them, they blame everybody else. If only I could get the workers who didn't interrupt me and who did everything I wanted, and who were more productive and didn't take time off and all of those things. But the realization has to be, actually, you don't start with your workers, you start with you. So if your workers aren't doing things in the way in which you want, why is that? Have you trained them effectively? Are you micromanaging so that they stop thinking for themselves? Because they know if they think for themselves, you just tell them it's not right.
Yeah, it's not how you wanted it done. And then it takes away their own personality and beliefs and thoughts.
Why would they do it when they know they're going to get shot down?
Yeah.
And so by starting with you, doing the deep dive work on yourself, and Genuinely You've got programs for personal and spiritual development, but it's also got leadership in the sense of leadership for life, but also leadership when you're leading other people as part of a team, or an organization, your business. And enlightened leadership, for me, I don't think we've ever been a time in history where it was more important. If you look around the world, the quality of leadership at every level, I think, is bullish and lacks integrity. And so for me, leadership, enlightened leadership, is around being authentic. You have to walk your talk. You have to model the behaviors and the values that are important to you, and lead by example. And ego should be left at home in bed under your pillow with your pajamas united, because ego does nothing to bring the best out in other people. You need to lead with integrity. And I think there's a huge lack of integrity if you look around what's going on.
I don't want to take this conversation
deep. It's not political.
Politics, but no, you're not. I just want to make a statement. I agree with everything you said. And we're in a time when absolutely leadership is lacking. I'm going to talk about here. I'm in the States, like him, hate him, indifferent. Donald Trump, I mean, there's things he believes in that I think would really help our country, but because of the way he handles himself and his character, it's difficult for anybody to take these things seriously because his ego is stamped on his forehead. So, and he has ideas that can absolutely move our country forward, but many people just look at him, and my parents included, like some people can't stand even looking at the guy on the screen because of how he acts. And even if there is some good that wants to come out, it's masked behind this crazy ego. And I agree with you that a more presidential person that has the ability to be humble and to be vulnerable and to lead by example is so welcoming right now because of what we're dealing with in our country. And that's not me trying to bash and even talk about any politics. It's simply identifying a leader and talking about someone who's relevant. As we record this, we're in the middle of the pandemic still as well. So I wanted to make sure I injected that into the story, because I agree. Leadership is something that you don't say things to get things done. You do things to show and work with people around you. I don't want to fill that in for you, but on the topic of leadership, talk about...
Can I just, before I leave
please
that,
add to that.
because for me, integrity is huge, but also compassion. And you've got, those leaders who believe they can do it all on their own are wrong, particularly as we're moving forward. You need, it's important to develop your staff. No one person can have all the answers. And it's when you embrace the collective experience, expertise, enthusiasm, and creativity of your staff, and those, collaborate with other people as well, that you're going to really get the best way forward. The thinking that's got us to this place isn't going to be the thinking that gets us out of where we are.
Right.
And so the danger when you are stuck in this cycle of ego and lack of integrity is it keeps repeating the same thinking, because people become yes men and women. They don't want to rock the boat because they don't want the consequences.
Yeah, the repercussions of it, sure.
And if you want people to really work and create a sense of goodwill and loyalty, then compassion and caring about your staff is paramount. But I would say it's broader than your staff. It's about making a positive difference to others and to the environment as well. And the last thing is you need courage.
Yeah.
And you really need courage to say, actually, that's not right. I'm not going to do that because it doesn't sit with my values.
It's not right. You don't just agree to it because you have to. There needs to be a healthy balance of something doesn't sound right, it doesn't look right. Someone needs to bring that to the table for leadership to evaluate it and move forward on something, opposed to just, we're too afraid to rock the boat, like you said.
And not only in terms of what you and your company do, but to have the courage to say when there are things going on in the world that are not right. I can't remember the name of the guy who said the only thing and I'm really crucifying this quote, I have to say, that the only thing for bad things to happen is for good men to stay silent. And I think we've seen too much of that in the past. We are a critical point. We are not going to have our children and our grandchildren and their children think of the legacy that we are leaving them in terms of environment. A couple of years ago, I went on a safari. It was the most wonderful experience. But, there are people who are going and enjoy killing animals just so that they can say they've killed them. And they're allowed to. There are legalized lion bones being sent to Asia, and the wild lion population in South Africa is decimated. How can that be right?
Right, and how are there not more people speaking up about it?
Yeah.
I even think one of the biggest things that's heavy on my heart is it's a national situation. It's our second most, highest crime. Drugs is number one, I guess, and number two is sex trafficking in our country. And people don't even want to talk about it because it makes you uncomfortable, and it's disgusting, it's gross. But if it's number two, I don't care if it's number 572, it needs to be addressed and taken care of. But it's number two, and most Americans don't even want to talk about it or figure out how they can help because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Think about the people who are dealing with it, who are being abused every day, and dealing with this and have no out. And most of us are just standing silent. It's disgusting.
We should be feeling incredibly uncomfortable about it.
How do you,
that we get off our bottoms and actually make a stand against it.
Yeah.
Rather than
people need to stand up, whatever the situation is, when it's not right, stand up. The power of the people will always overturn a smaller group of people that are maybe in charge, right? And
when people think, what power have I got? There's only me. Think about spending the night in a bedroom with a mosquito.
Yes.
And think about the power of something very tiny to actually make a difference. Not a positive one in that case, but
No, it's
we
an
have
awesome quote. I
collective
love it.
power if we choose to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's time for those people who are much more awakened and more conscious to actually get together and say, enough. These dark, awful things that are based on fear and control, we need to end those. With the 21st century.
Yeah. Yeah. Communication is the easiest. You can text people all, like you can form groups, you can create a Facebook group. I mean, there's no reason that people cannot come together, even because we're in a pandemic. Like there's ways you and I are connecting from England to New York.
Yeah.
And we're doing so at a touch of a button. So there's really no excuse to stay silent and not do something about it. I want to go back a little bit. We're talking about leadership. A lot of the people who tune in are either current leaders or becoming leaders of tomorrow as well. How one of the most important things, and it's something as I build my team as well, that's really important and also very difficult. And I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is, especially with larger teams. How do you make sure you have I want to make sure I word this right, but a pulse on your team. So you were the head teacher, again, which was the leader of the entire department and the whole school. How do you make sure you have a pulse on everybody and a checks and balances without micromanaging? There's that fine line. What did you find that worked? How did you know how someone was feeling, acting? Can you share how you did that?
The first thing is to create what is a truly learning organization, where everybody is involved in the development of the organization and of one another. Because even the people who are low in experience and status have something to offer in terms of ideas and so on. And I think to be accessible, I was talking to somebody only yesterday, and they work in a big organization. Let me take a step back. If you are really being strategic about how you delegate and how you use your team as a whole, and that you are not micromanaging, that you are working strategically, then part of that strategic development, I would suggest to you, is to free time to be able to get to the chalk face or to the shop floor or to the coal face and talk to the people within your organization.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you get in and they trust you, then you are going to find out things that you would never find out, particularly if you've surrounded yourself by yes men and women. So I was talking to someone yesterday, and they work in a big organization, but the managing director of that organization, or the CEO, he has a half an hour interview with every new person who's appointed. Now, that sounds enormous, but one of the things to recognize is that people are so happy there, they tend to leave because they've retired, had babies, or, so the turnover is not huge, even though there are large numbers on the staff. But he makes the point of making that connection. He can say, this is my vision, this is what I stand for, and they get to feel special because they've had some time. And he also gets to know who they are. But then there are ways of bringing people together. And I think we've got 2 ears and a mouth for a really good reason. Too many leaders use their mouth far more than they use their ears.
Yeah.
And getting in and listening, and if you're authentic, if you are genuine about the fact you care, and they know that, and you can demonstrate that, it's not in the grand gestures. It's, when you walk along the corridor, do you actually make eye contact and say hello? Do you, if there's a special event going on and you're made aware of it, do you make a point of sending a message to say, good luck for, or congratulations on? And then part of your job of your managers is that they also, they model those behaviors in their teams. And they expect that of their middle managers, and those middle managers make everybody in the company feel valued. I can remember having conversations with young teachers who used to who would often be dismissive about the site staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd take them to task and say, do you want to clean the boys' toilets? And they go, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And so I've worked in many places where in the summer particular, you can smell the boys' toilets from 100 meters.
Ugh.
You never, ever see anything but a sparkly, clean school. Have you ever thought how much you should be saying thank you to them? Because you don't want to do it, but you like being in it.
And they're doing it, yeah.
So for me, every person, whether they're the kitchen porter or they're the gardener or they're the CEO, your finance officer, they have a part to play. And so for me, what I would say to everybody in school and in the organizations that I work with, you are the leading professional in whatever role you are in. Take a pride in that. Be passionate about it. Even if you're washing up, make sure it's the best way and do it with good heart, because it's an important job.
Yeah, I love that. I feel what you're saying is give everybody on the team, whether they're cleaning the toilet, they're a leader on your team, and they're leading a department within an organization. Doesn't matter what level someone is at, the CEO or an employee that's been on 1 minute on the job. They have purpose. When someone understands their purpose, and you basically just unlaid this whole thing, so I'm just reiterating it. When they have purpose and they understand how important their role is, the toilet cleaner, the janitor, the employee that's just doing numbers all day long, analytics, and they're in the computer, and they might feel like they don't really gel with the rest of the team. If they know what their purpose is and that it's so important for them to do their job at a high level and everyone else benefits from it, I feel they would do it at a higher level than if they're just secluded, don't really understand where they fit in the whole scheme. And yeah, I think it's super important. People thrive when they're on purpose.
And if they know the vision and the purpose of the company, whatever that business is, and they feel that they have a role to play in delivering that, the research has shown that has more motivation than giving people a pay rise.
Agreed.
And I think we're going into times when there's going to be a significant skills shortage. The cost of employing new people and training them and getting them up to speed is huge, not only in terms of money, but times and energy. So it makes sense to make your staff want to be part of it and to grow with the company. And, you can do that in so many different ways. But I think all too often people are seen as expendable. I think we've got a lot to learn in terms of leadership. There is too much of a culture which is there's no boundary between work and home. There's no recognition that actually we are better workers when we are rested and we've done something creative that's filled us up. People are too busy being busy rather than being productive.
Yes. I've been in that too. You're on a hamster wheel, There's a funny movie quote. I think it's from the movie Christmas Vacation. And it's talking about, he's like, I think Clark's doing all the Christmas lights, and the wife or daughter says like, hey, he worked really hard on it because the lights aren't twinkling, and the father-in-law is like, kind of giving him a hard time. Someone says, hey, he's working really hard out there. And his response is, the father-in-law, I believe it was, says, washing machines work hard, right? Hamsters on a wheel work hard, but you can work, but what's your level of productivity? And that's my thing that I've realized over the last 3 years as an entrepreneur is I'm constantly busy. People know if you call me at 9:00 at night, I may not be able to talk because I'm working on something highly important. But how many times is it something that's just busy work? And is it something that's actually part of a game plan that's productive? And I will be vulnerable and say, there's many times I go, wow, this seems important, but it's not tier one important right now.
There are a few things that you can really do that bring this home, and we're all guilty of it. I don't think there's a single leader that doesn't go through times of that, but some people go through a whole work life like that. So ask you to go through your diary, have traffic light colours. Green is it's it's right on point. It's pulling, it's really helping me deliver my vision, my mission, and my targets. It's absolutely crucial. Amber is I'm investing this time in terms of either I'm creating a product or a publication or something. It will be crucial once it's done, but I'm preparing for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Red is, what on earth am I doing this for? Could this be done by somebody else? Does it need to be done at all? Yeah. And it's really helpful to do that probably about every 6 months, because what happens is it creeps up on you. You do it and you're very mindful of it, and then suddenly you look in your diary again and you think, what's going on? Because that old pattern creeps back.
I believe it's called, I think there's an Eisenhower. You ever hear the Eisenhower quadrant? I think that's what it is. Yeah, check it out. Eisenhower quadrant. It's a time management tool where you have 4 quadrants. I'm looking it up as we're speaking here. So there's urgent and not urgent. And then there's important.
So I didn't realize that was called. Yeah, beg your pardon. Yeah.
And that's basically what it is. So you try to have more urgent, important things happen first. It's quadrant 1. 2 would be not urgent, yet still important.
Yeah.
And then it goes from there. Obviously, if it's urgent but not important, you can delegate it. And if it's not urgent and not important, like you said, declutter it, or maybe it doesn't need to be happening. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is look at the meetings that you're spending your time in and think about the corporate cost of meetings. If it's just you, it's your hourly rate and what you could be earning if you were doing something else. Mm-hmm. But also it's all of the on costs and the fact that the work is waiting for you while you're in that meeting. But let's say you've got 10 people in a meeting. Mm-hmm. So you've got their 10 salaries plus their on costs, plus all the work that they would have been doing if they'd been at their desk. And prior to lockdown, travel costs and travel time. And very often at meetings, they're not focused.
Yeah.
The discussion is either very floppy and there's no real decisions made, or I've been in meetings where we've got 10 minutes for this, and even though it's really critical and the discussion's only just got going, they move on and say, oh, we'll look at that again in the next meeting. So it never gets properly.
I think organizations kind of feel like if we say we had a meeting and we get everybody in a room together, we might have a little bit of an agenda, but we can say like, okay, we had our weekly meeting. But would employees maybe be better off if they were more productive doing the things that they needed to do? And if you have a meeting, it better have purpose again. And everyone in the room needs to understand the purpose of it. Because how many people just kind of sit there, they're on their phones, and it happens. I've been in these corporate environments where that happens. And it's like, and sometimes the camaraderie is not even happening because people are all individually taking care of their own thing. Where it's like, man, that was an opportunity for a good team meeting where you could have got everybody's attention, reinvigorated their purpose again, right? And just like, it was a lot of missed opportunities. I remember in meetings where I'm like, what are we doing? Another 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes out the window. That's
the other thing. I think if you're leading a meeting is to recognize, for example, you may have extroverts in the room. Those extroverts process their information externally. So you ask a question and they just go blah, 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 blah. And as they're blah, blah, blahing, so they're thinking. Introverts, on the other hand, sit and ponder. It's not that they're not taking part, but so often they don't get a chance or they give up because only the extroverts get heard.
Right.
When actually the ideas of the introvert are probably or possibly more thought out, and ideally what you want is an approach that engages both.
Yeah. Wow, that's extremely well said. That's a mic drop moment on Mic Up right there, because it's super important. Again, like you said, don't mistaken someone being quiet for not paying attention or being disconnected. They're internalizing something. And if you just override the fact that they didn't raise their hand and didn't somehow engage everyone in the room, you're missing a ton of opportunities. So think about that in your organization. If you're listening to this right now And we're in the pandemic, so you're probably doing remote learning and remote meetings and everything else. So it's even harder to identify someone being introverted with a good idea, because you can't even see it on their body language, really, or not as easily.
But there are techniques that you can
So tell us about it. So what are some of the techniques to make sure everybody's being understood?
So, for example, let me give you 3 or 4 very quickly. One is to say, right, I want you to take 2 minutes, jot down all of your ideas about whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to come around the room and I'm going to ask you for your feedback. And if you know who the extroverts are, you ask them first, and then you go work your way around to the introverts. But everybody knows that they've got time to get their thoughts together, and they're going to be asked. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another is to use a breakout room and get people to work in pairs or threes, but match your extroverts with extroverts and introverts with introverts. Introvert does not necessarily mean shy. You could have shy extroverts and you could have very confident introverts. It's about how they process information. Another way to do it is to give people pre-warning before the meeting what you're going to talk about, and say, bring your ideas. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that there's a little exercise that you can do. For example, let's say you're looking for priorities and how you're going to prioritize something. I'd get people to work in pair, initially by themselves, then in pairs. So in your pairs, I want you to agree the priority order, and they do a diamond. So priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In your pairs, agree your priority order, and what the priorities are in your priority order. Then bring 2 pairs together, and you can do that easily in a group Zoom room, sharing a screen. Right now, you've got 2 sets of priorities. Negotiate and agree on a combined set of priorities. Still has to have the same format. Mm-hmm. Then you put a 4 and a 4, put those together. And if you keep doing that, then you end up with what is a whole group set of priorities where everybody has had an input. Mm.
It's great.
And you've given them time to do that. There's lots of different ways, depending on whether you're doing it. That works face-to-face as well.
Yeah.
But it's about being
engaging everybody. You're getting everybody involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're understanding what's going on in their head, and also in the way that they feel about it. Unfortunately, we're kind of coming towards the end here. I do have a handful of questions, and these are designed to learn a little bit more about you. So we want to know more about Gina. Talk about one new skill or a positive takeaway that you have from the quarantine.
I have learned new software. So I have become intimately acquainted with Lumina 5 and Otter AI. One creates short movies out of blogs, and the other is a transcript piece of software. So a lot of stuff about software. Yeah. And I've learned a lot about me. I am more resilient and self-contained than I thought, because for months, instead of having a busy life, seeing lots of people, I live on my own, and so have seen very few people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's great perspective too. And you were able to learn some software and things and if you had everything else on your calendar, those can get pushed to the side, where now you said, I'm going to schedule some time out and put these in that important quadrant, because it's something I wanted to learn.
And I've written another book as well during that time. So,
just throw that in there. I mean, hey, what the heck? You're a #1 international bestselling author. Tell us about your books, and what I'll do is I'll have all the links to those as well, so people can find it. But what are some of the titles that we can look out for?
So, in terms of those people going from the world of education into the world of work, Kickstart Your Career. How to be a professional grown-up easily and quickly. Mm-hmm. Manage your staff more effectively, and that's looking at management techniques and some of those things that I've been talking about around managing meetings, interviewing people and so on. They're in that book. Chariots on Fire is my first book around personal development, and was my story and how I gave myself the positive advantage. Thriving, Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment, were a book a few years on in terms of how I'd taken that development in terms of personal resilience and the capacity to understand the importance of beliefs, relationships, our attitude to success, how we manage change and transition, purpose and fulfillment. And that's the basis of one of the personal development programs that I've created. During lockdown, I've done a little journal for people who are 60 and over. You're not over the hill, become a maturepreneur. So that's been published. And will be another one that's being published is about enlightened leadership. And again, it's an action planner. So principles are there, but then there are questions to help you consider how you can become an enlightened leader. And about to be published next week, I think, is again, it's a journal, but it's about hope and the importance for leaders to generate hope for themselves and for others.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of hope, how do you feel you can deliver hope in a time like this? I mean, we're in a pandemic. What is, if you can give us maybe one takeaway that snaps in your head quick, what's the number one way? How do we keep hope in this crazy time?
I can't do it with one thing. I can do it with a few. A clear sense of purpose.
Okay.
Because if you've got a clear sense of purpose, then that's a reason for getting up every day. A recognition that I think that there is a bigger force than us, that there's more to life than the things that we realize. And even though today has been a day that's been grey and it's not stopped pouring with rain, but above the clouds is the sun, and knowing that tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah,
and focus on what you can do rather than what you can't. And that's been, for me, a huge thing. There have been times that if nobody left a cup down and a kettle filled, I couldn't make a cup of tea. But I could go in and to work, be effective, make a difference, and do something I loved. And so you have a choice moment by moment. How do you want to focus your life? What do you want to do? So focus on the things that you can do. Because if you focus on the things that make you fearful, you go into very left-brained activity, which is either or. It's either I've got to do this, or I'm not going to survive. But if you go from a place of, and I'll call it love, and I don't mean pink and fluffy, but from a place of possibility, you start to use your right brain, which means then that you are looking for solutions. And if you look for them, you'll find them. If you believe they're not there, then you don't even look.
If you spend time and energy on it, it's going to grow. There's going to be, extended height of learning and changing and adapting. And if you don't put any time and energy, it's like water in the garden, right? If you're not constantly watering it, it's not going to be green and flourish. You mentioned the word purpose.
One more thing. Stop listening to fake news and social media and listening, and ban complaining.
I love that.
It's more contagious than COVID. Okay. It should be banned. Instead of complaining, count your blessings and be really grateful, because we are so lucky. If you're watching this, you're in the top few percent of the world. You've got enough to eat. You're not worried about your house being attacked by marauding whatevers. You are lucky. You've got clean plumbing. You've got enough to eat. You're okay. So be grateful.
Yeah, that is what I say. I always send off the show: be great and be grateful. That is it right there. And what are 3 things that you're most grateful for?
For my friends and family, for the natural world, and for the fact that I have been given the huge opportunity to serve others. Yeah.
Service above self, right? That's your purpose again. This word, that's going to be somewhere in the title. We got to have purpose in the title of this episode because it's come up so many times. Who would you say is your biggest influence?
In my early life, it would be my father. A man with a huge intellect, a heart the size of a cabbage, who was selfless. Times drove me up the wall. Please don't think he was a saint, because he wasn't. But always looked to how he could make a positive difference to other people. And even the day before he died, when I went back to the house, there was a letter and he was 18, a couple of weeks off 89. And there was a letter that he'd penned that was helping somebody. And it was not in the envelope. It was all, he'd not signed. It was just, he just penned it. He was helping somebody else. And that was his last act before he went into hospital. And I think that's a huge example.
Wow. I think it's important too that you mentioned, look, there's things you learned from your father. He was a huge influence into your early life, and things you learned from him, it sounds like are some of the foundational reasons of your success as well. But at the same time, not everybody's 100% perfect in everything, in every element of their life, but you can still take away those extremely important moments with your father and teaching and even learning from someone's behavior, the good. And I look at it like, whenever I'm learning something too, it could be a book I read, and maybe it's a 14 chapter book and 10 chapters are amazing and 4 were kind of here or there. I'm not saying discredit the information, but don't throw the whole thing out. If someone has maybe a character flaw, don't throw them to the trash. And what's the good things that they have, that they're able to give you? What can you learn? And then, so I think it's a great point that you're saying, hey, look, you learned a ton from him. At the same time, there are some things that he could have cleaned up, and that, I just think it's really special, and sorry for your loss with your father as well.
Well, at 89, he'd lived a full
that is a full life for sure. Yeah. Now, if you can be known for one thing, what would that be and why?
I'd like to achieve my mission, which is to positively impact on 1 million people through enlightened leadership.
Wow.
It would be my privilege to feel that I had made a difference, because for every leader, that, like a stone being thrown into a pond, ripples out and helps others, which is why for me, if you go to influence and develop leaders, that gives you a greater opportunity to make a difference. And if I could be, and I think ultimately, I'd like people to remember me that actually I walked my talk.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just stuff that I spout. This is stuff that I live, and that I used it in my own organizations, and that I truly care about people and want to make that difference.
Well, I want to let you know, and a lot of times when we're moving so fast and we're doing so many different things, it's hard to reflect on it. You are doing that. Like, I don't know what the number is of how many leaders you've impacted through enlightened leadership, but you're doing it every single day. You're doing it at a high level. That is truly why I wanted you here. Genuinely, there's that word, why I wanted you here. So I appreciate you with that. With the last question, because I know we both need to go our separate ways here. And by the way, you have a friend here in the States. And if you're ever in Buffalo, New York, which is Western New York, please let me know. And I would love to treat you to a cup of tea or coffee if you enjoy coffee.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
It's a total honor to have you in my network now, I'll say, and as a friend. Let's deliver one final message to our audience. It's the mission of the show. I told it to you off camera. To leave our audience inspired to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams. What would you tell them?
I'd say to you, live every day as if it's your last. Nobody wants on their epitaph, I wish I'd worked harder, or I wish that you don't remember the things that you didn't. I'm not going to get this right. Don't put stuff off.
Yeah.
Do it. Grasp the nettle. And, very often we stay in our comfort zone because we don't want to feel discomfort. Instead of it being discomfort, it's just unfamiliar. So like a pair of new shoes, it might pinch a bit, but do it a few times and your comfort zone will expand. You'll be amazed at how much more potential you have than you realize. Just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the greatest of the great were as green on the first day that they tried whatever their greatness was. Michael Jordan dribbled a basketball for the first time one day. He wasn't amazing at basketball his first time ever trying it. He did it over time. That's a sports analogy. It could be business. The most successful people in business have tried and failed more than most people have even got started.
I'm
So,
told that Dyson, the guy that created Hoovers, he
yeah,
made 2,000 prototypes before he had one that he could sell.
exactly. He would have stopped at, 1,999. He's not one of the most successful business people of all time. I don't know if how accurate the number is, but I've heard it referenced many times is Edison, 10,000 failed
Yeah,
attempts of making that light bulb turn on, right? So
yeah,
he didn't give up. He knew that he was close or that there was just something missing, and he believed in himself to keep going. You look at Steve Jobs. He was actually fired from Apple at one point and then asked to come back. If he would have been sour about it or didn't take another chance or keep going, he would have never, his success happened that second time with the company
yeah.
where he became one of the greatest entrepreneurs, turning computers and smartphones into how we interact with them today.
And I just say, be kind. Be kind, and let's be more playful. We need a bit more joy and fun in our lives. And I often say to people, it's time to be childlike, the awe and wonder of a child who's kicking leaves and stamping in the puddles.
Yeah.
Childlike, and let's stop being childish.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that gets kind of beat out of us as we grow up. That amazement that we have as a child where you want to go and see and feel and nothing, you don't know if it's going to burn. That's why I got to tell, hey, this is hot, or you got to really have a fence around a pool because a baby's just going to be like, water looks fun, I'm going to jump in. They don't know. And, but then it gets taken away. And why as an adult are we not like that I want to try something new, or I'm going to go do this, or I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to go and figure it out because we did that as kids. There's nothing else to do but go and figure things out. And so I think that is an amazing bookend to this awesome conversation with you. I feel I can talk to you for hours on end here, and you can continue to deliver value because you've been doing that for a very long time. Gina Gardiner, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I love you guys, and thank you so much for tuning in. Check out more show notes and information on each episode at mikeduppodcast.com, MIKED uppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.